projects here have been successful so far that you've done?
Yeah, so our three main areas that we focus on are swine waste to energy, and that's been a really big success, our Low Dairy Farms project. We've seen from that project we've managed to publish a number of publications that show how this can be done and how it can be scaled. And so what we're seeing now is movement on the ground in North Carolina for biogas, and so that's something that we had a direct hand in that we're really proud of. The second piece that we've looked at is residential energy efficiency and solar, and looking to see how we can either remove barriers or encourage people locally and within the communities to do both those types of projects. And we're really proud of the tree planting program that we've created with a number of partners locally. We, as a school, have purchased offsets to get over 400 trees in the ground locally. So that's in Durham, North Carolina, we had a tree planting, Wilson, North Carolina, Charlotte, Greensboro, the Burlington area. And so, 400 trees is not a big number, but when you add in the fact that Urban Offsets has been able to use our protocol and really scale this system, they're expecting over 20,000 trees in the ground next year, which is a huge number, really scalable, and that can be used by other universities. And so that's one of the things, since we're the first doing this, or one of the first doing this, is that we want to make sure that we share best practices, that other schools can learn from the mistakes we've made, and also the things that we've done well.
Natural gas hurts people, hurts the planet. 100 times more warming comes from methane than carbon dioxide. Did y'all know that? A lot more global warming is happening right now as a result of all these new gas-fired power plants and all these new fracking operations. And so we've got to be serious about not having new gas-powered plants like the one proposed here.
So, do you know where energy on Duke's campus comes from? I hear it's not very sustainable. That Duke Power, burns a lot of coal and dumps things in rivers that it shouldn't be. That's what I've heard. I don't know if that's true. And do you support Duke making efforts to use more renewable energy and sustainable solutions? Yeah, of course. I mean, if the university is supposed to be, the model for how people should act writ large, if it should be, a pioneer and a leader for the country, something for people to look up to and forward to, I think that Duke should set the example for, using renewable energy, because, without it, we'll probably all be screwed pretty soon. So, have you heard about the natural gas plant that Duke Energy is planning to build on Duke's campus? I have not.
Can you say yes for solar? Yes!
So one thing I know that's been a struggle is renewable energy on and off campus. So if you could talk a bit about why it's been so hard to establish more renewable energy off campus, and what those struggles are. What is it, economic? Is it technological? Or what really is going on?
The way we look at all these projects is we look at the amount of emissions they reduce, and then we compare that to the cost of that project, and then we also look at the co-benefits. So we kind of, we're looking at everything relatively. So we're comparing different project types and seeing, okay, for this many dollars we can reduce this many emissions and get these co-benefits. And the reason that renewable energy is hard in that context, especially locally, is that within North Carolina we actually have what I'll call it relatively clean energy in the context of carbon, and that's driven significantly by the nuclear power plants here, right? So our emissions factor per unit of energy that we produce is actually relatively low. And what that means is that when you're looking at the impact of renewable energy, you're actually displacing some of those emissions, right? But if you're in an area with relatively clean energy, you have to install more renewable energy to get the same amount of emission reductions that you might have to elsewhere, which means it's going to cost more. They looked at this and they compared the cost of reducing emissions through renewable energy off campus with the other project types, and they realized that it was much more expensive per unit of reduction than the other project types. And from the context of co-benefits, it had different co-benefits, and I don't want to say fewer co-benefits, but different co-benefits that we might not be able to tap into as directly.
If you could explain a bit about why solar energy is not being pursued right now on campus as aggressively as some might like, and what other options there are going forward in that field.
So there are a variety of interesting factors that contribute to the fact that solar in North Carolina is slightly more challenging than it might be in some other states, one of which has to do with the regulatory structure of our state. So what we could do is basically like residences, like houses, you could have, you know, solar panels on your roof or whatever that you can actually use to capture some of the electricity and power some of your operations. But it's unlikely that would satisfy our overall needs right now. And so Duke is still looking, the university is still looking at buying power from the grid from Duke Energy. And I think that, you know, relative to some of our competitors, the regulatory landscape that we find ourselves in limits our options a little bit more than it would for some other people.
And so another form of energy which is growing and hasn't really been addressed by Duke at all is wind, and specifically offshore wind energy.
Yes.
The first couple farms were built in the U.S. last fall. If you could explain what the difference of those energy forms are in terms of cost and production, if you understand that.
So offshore wind is something I've spent a lot of time thinking about.
Great.
So the first functioning offshore wind farm in the U.S. is off of Block Island, Rhode Island. It's 5 wind turbines at about 24 megawatts total capacity. And it was really a demonstration project. To be really truly economical, we're going to be looking at wind farms much larger than 5 turbines. But Block Island was unique in the sense that it was not connected to the grid on the mainland. Okay, so it's about 2 miles offshore, might be more than that. Wasn't connected to the mainland grid. All of their electricity basically came from diesel generation. It was extremely expensive.
Prove that biogas is actually viable. There are wonderful ways for Duke University to be a leader, and we have been. We have pioneered a project in Yadkin County with the Lloyd Ray Farms project to assess the viability of biogas there, and we actually have a functioning methane capture biogas system that helps power that farm.
So I think there's actually a couple of different roles for Duke students and faculty to play in the current and ongoing climate change policy debate. So one is what you mentioned, which is actually changing your individual behavior and encouraging other people to change their behavior sort of directly. You know, there are plenty of, Duke even has a carbon footprint calculator that can help you sort of figure out sort of where your biggest impacts are, so that you might think about targeting those. Of course, I'm an economist, so sometimes our biggest impacts are also where we have the biggest benefits, right? So if it's really important to your career that you go to these international conferences, that might be a really big carbon impact, but that might not be the place you want to cut back. I do think that moral suasion works, but I also think prices can work. And so, and if I had to bet on one or the other, I would bet on prices, I guess. And so I think that, these are particularly challenging times for that message at the moment, but we will not be living in this moment forever. And so at some point we're going to have what the political scientists refer to as a policy window, right? There's going to be an opportunity again for us to actually consider national climate policy, and we want, to train people to think about what should that look like.